Hello, everyone. Welcome back to CX Network's Voice of the Customer 2023 event. I'm here with Joe Goldberg, who I'm going to hand over to in just a couple of seconds. And he's going to be discussing the importance of brand strategy, and he's going to give you some examples of what he's been doing at Santander. Just before I do hand over to Joe, I'd like to draw your attention again to the State of CX survey that we've got on right now. It gives you the opportunity to give your 2 cents about the global state of CX, and we'll enter you into a prize draw for a $1,500 Amazon voucher. So I'll pop that in the chat. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand you over to Joe. Hi, Joe.
Great, thanks, Chloe, and it's great to be here. Just to introduce myself first, my name is Joe Goldberg. I'm the head of brand strategy in the UK for Santander. And often I think people think brand is all about advertising, the kind of logos, the colorways, all that sort of stuff. And I do all of that. But I think the thing that we're completely understanding where brand is meeting the whole world of customer experience is, I think, really clear understanding about how brand can be an organizing principle in your organization. And again, it's kind of a point of friction in the organization in terms of, in my experience, the world of customer experience feels very dogged in its focus on the tangible, on the stuff you can touch, rather than the things that consumers will feel. And I guess in our view, in the world of brand, we think the things that people feel are the things that drive their satisfaction ultimately with the brand, and then their kind of customer experience ultimately reflected in the kind of, I guess, plethora of net promoter score studies that people partake in. And so today I wanted to talk to you about how you combine story with experience and work with Santander, and to show how we think brands is a really important part of kind of driving our thinking around customer experience. So we'll start with this guy. I mean, you know, again, I reckon everyone in this room hopefully recognises Mr. Racheld and his net promoter score philosophy. And I think even just reading his latest tome where he talks about NPS 3.0, I picked up these 3 really key areas that I think are really important to think about. And that is, 1, he says, look, you need to find ways to enrich customers' lives. 2, you need to build a culture in the organization around the customer and, I guess, delivering that enrichment. And lastly, use feedback. Now, the last one feels obvious to me in terms of, you know, let's listen to the customer and see what they say. But those first 2, enriching the customer's life and building a culture, comes down to, for me, much more the intangible. Otherwise, every single customer experience that I have is going to be the same. And I'm not going to be able to recommend one brand over another. I'm not really going to drive up my advocacy, and I'm not really going to drive memories for my consumers or my customers that make them want to come back and then recommend the business. So not to trash his work, but I kind of feel if we want to avoid a world in which we all end up shouting at our colleagues, just think customer first, without really explaining what it means to think customer first and be customer obsessed in the kind of world of Amazon. I think we need to kind of get back to brand, which I think in the business world, I recognise has fallen very much out of favour, and not least because it's digital. So I want to tell a short story, and then I'll go on to what we've discovered at Santander, and then I'd really love to have some questions from the floor. So, you know, when I talk about MBS and try to explain how I think about it, I always talk about an imaginary Big Mac. And so I should say, like, for legal reasons, I'm sure this situation does not occur, and it's not meant to reflect from McDonald's, but I just kind of want to kind of people imagine that they've been out for a drink or a good night out with their friends. They've probably had a bit too much cocktails or too much alcohol or too many bubbles, and they recognise they need to soak up a bit of alcohol. So they fall into a McDonald's that's the last place that is open before they go home, and they order their kind of staple Big Mac. And, you know, the Big Mac's been sitting there for a couple of hours or however long. It's a bit cold, it's not particularly great, but it does the job of soaking it up. But when I get home, I start to feel a bit sick and a bit queasy, and I'm not quite sure whether it's the Big Mac or it's the alcohol. And things end up as they might do, with your head kind of down the proverbial toilet, not feeling very well, and you manage to crawl into bed. You wake up the next morning to a buzz kind of spiky questionnaire with an NPS question. Based on your experience last night at McDonald's, how likely would you be to recommend the brand or to recommend the restaurant, whether it's brand or function? I think is neither here nor there. I'm absolutely convinced that your pre-position before going into McDonald's and your attributes of the brand is going to be a huge determinant of how you respond to that. If you liked McDonald's beforehand, or even if you love the brand, you're probably going to go as far as maybe to blame yourself for going at a bad time, and are more likely to think it was the alcohol than the burger. And so you could still, despite the fact you had a really not great experience, and that processes didn't follow through in that particular branch of McDonald's, on yourself and other things other than brand, you'll still say, yes, I will advocate. Or based on my experience last night, I would still say Mac and Cheese every time will do the job. If I didn't like, and I was already in a negative net promoter score space anyway, or a passive space, so to speak, I think I'm probably just going to become more negative. But on the ultimate end of the day, it's not really changing my attitudes towards Sprouts. And so for me, the role of brand is about, in this story, building expectancy, and not just is this the experience we'd like to deliver, because of course that's the bit you can control, but setting a clear expectation for the customer of what they might expect to deliver, and whether their experience feels part of their story of how they want to live their lives and the wider being, and whether it fits there or it doesn't. And hopefully that kind of then explains. And the reason I kind of wanted to tell that story was I recognize banking could be pretty turgid. It's full of negative experiences, from charges to overdrafts to financial stress. And so as a value category, it's a difficult one in which you're kind of driving NPS scores, and ourselves and most of our competitors sit in the low 20s. The super new fintechs tend to do a lot higher. But again, I think that's speaking to the power of brand. And again, why I think this is interesting. So my job, rather than driving NPS score, is to drive something called brand affinity. So we ask people every month whether Santander is a brand that they love. We get about, again, 15% of people are prepared to say that they love their bank. So for us, that equates to something like 6.5 million people every year or every month tend to say that they love Santander. Not half our customer base, so we're doing quite well among the customers. And what's driving that brand affinity, not just for us, but for all brands, is whether they recognize you have a brand purpose. Are you doing something to improve people's lives? Do they see that in your new products and your new products, the innovation, the stuff you're bringing to market? Do you then experience things that kind of reflect that purpose? Do you see that then in the communications? Do you like their advertising? And then if that all works out, you tend to end up with a higher brand affinity, which overall, according to like Kantar's work, are the things that drive brand affinity, and that is critical to driving meaningful differentiation in the market. The bit that I've added is people, and then in line with Rachel, if you don't have the people to drive the kind of innovation or the customer experiences, whether that's in terms of digital design or in our branches, then you're never going to have the affinity, because you're not going to have people getting what it's about. So I agree. We need to have a really clear consumer-centric idea about what we're here to do to improve people's lives, but that needs to be meaningful. That needs to have something deeper to it than just a smooth banking experience, because that's never going to be enough to really drive advocacy in the market. And it needs to be something that engages our customers, our colleagues, so they can really get behind it, be motivated to go that bit further for their customers, but also have an idea of what they delivered. And that's exactly the work we did. But two further proof points. Firstly, when we look at what drives brand affinity and drives NPS, there's very little that's impacted directly by advertising. Only 23% of the brand affinity is driven by what we say to our consumers. Well, most of that is indistinguishable from what our marketing mix model would say is in the sub base. And I think that's fundamentally about the design and the delivery of the business proposition itself. And the NPS, well, it's smaller on media, even smaller on media. But again, similar, a lot of it seems intangible. When you look at what's driving NPS, I think what's interesting is that the analysis just something like 35% of your NPS score comes from brand or emotional elements that aren't actually to do with either your product or experience. They are the intangible element of what's doing that. Now, it's very easy to ignore it and say that most of your, therefore, NPS score has been driven fundamentally by your product experience. But I think a 35% premium is well worth going after. Then you've got product and price. That's probably the bit that feels less within your control. It moves more slowly. Certainly in my category, it moves more slowly. But then the experience itself, and you can see how that breaks down digital branch. Now, just as an anecdote, a huge part of our branch experience is driven by ATM transactions. And I should say, for those that don't appreciate, in banking, NPS is more of a regulatory millstone as much as it is a desire. We can't really choose whether we want to partake in MPS or not. It's conducted nationally, and we are required to publish it publicly on our website and in branch our MPS score. And a huge part of our MPS score is driven by people taking out cash from a cash machine. And like based on that experience, I'm not sure how to get out. I asked them £20, I got £20 back. How's that going to be more? And that's exactly kind of what we look to do. Last but not least, I guess, from a brand point of view, to bring it back to the brand point of view, a lot of brand models have really focused on building your brand kind of relationship on this pre-purchase. Where we're now starting to see is brands like Apple or Nike or all the big brands are looking for a purchase and a post-purchase relationship with the customer and are investing there in order to maintain their relationship. And therefore, in a digital age, and for a service brand like Santander, which is fundamentally what we are, investing more in purchase and post-purchase to deliver brand experience seems to be a more central place to kind of place your marketing mix. And that's reinforced again by the CX Plus study that Kantar did, where they show the role of brand promise and creating lasting memories as being really important in terms of delivery of CX. So this is what we did. We have this purpose at Santander called Here to Help You Prosper. That's why we're here to help businesses and people prosper. And it's a difficult purpose to work with in that it's not immediately obvious to our colleagues or our customers what prosperity might mean. So look, the first thing we did was do a huge amount of work, which is a whole nother talk, which I'm sure you can find on the internet somewhere, around what prosperity really means to customers. And essentially, if I was kind of just to simplify it for the sake of this talk, the thing that we landed upon and discovered was that prosperity wasn't actually directly related to wealth for most people anymore. It was much more about what their hopes held for the future in very simple terms. And so then if this is our purpose for the bank, then actually what we need to do is be about engaging our customers and helping them realize or see that change is possible and help see what the first 1 or 2 steps are that they could do to get there. What is interesting about our purpose, and as a purpose-led business that we officially are, is from top to bottom, if you go and ask people blindly in the business, our purpose, what's that about? They'll say, well, we're about prosperity. That's why we're in investments and savings and things like mortgages, because we help people buy homes. And if that is uniquely our purpose, if that's distinctly what brand is, then it doesn't help us stand out in the market. It doesn't help us deliver a memorably different experience from that of our competitors, because it's a claim that Lloyd's can make, it's a claim that Nationwide can make, it's a claim that pretty much any financial service brand could make. And actually the job here is to make prosperity mean anything but your financial wealth and money in your asset base. So look, we worked with four branches: Solihull, Enfield, Hertford Road, for those that are very familiar, but that's kind of a sub-branch, and then Tottenham. And what you've got in there is a very different set of spread of demographics, as well as kind of customer base. Solihull having a lot of people who are much more wealthy and older, Enfield and Tottenham being more urbane, but Tottenham being an area, one of the most deprived parts of Britain. Again, having its own unique circumstances that we worked with. And what we did was, one, we trained them in how MPS worked. That was obviously really important to understand how difficult it was to get a promoter experience and how to drive it. But we ran this series of exercises to educate and engage our colleagues in what our purpose was about. And these were specifically, I guess, bite-sized exercises that could take place in the morning whip. So every morning our branch colleagues will get together for 15 minutes to talk about how they're going to manage the day, who's going to stay in which part of the estate, who's going to be front of house, who's going to be on desks, etc., and run the operations. And there's a kind of 10-minute window in which they can do a quick exercise. And so these are all designed to be kind of really clear. The first one is just helping people have a core understanding of our purpose. The second was sharing insights about our customers and what prosperity meant to them. The third was about conversations behind banking, where we kind of gamified situations and got people to role play, kind of conversations they could have. Zero to hero is what it sounds like. It's fixing problems that might have happened. And then how do you identify your promoters, your regular footfall to kind of come in and put through. Now, of those exercises, the first two were the two that were the most compelling. And I don't think they would mind me telling the story, but the two branch heads that we worked with, one, they both were like in this kind of mortgage space to start with when we talk about the prosperity. But when we ran through this exercise, I'll never forget that, like for Vinny, who ran Enfield, his prosperity goal was, I get it. It's about, for me, it's about learning Greek, because he himself was Greek Cypriot. And what he wanted to do was be able to speak Greek so he could translate the conversation between his kids and his grandparents in the same way that his dad had done for him. Nothing to do with money, something that's a little hard and stretchy, something that he needs to navigate, but it was personal to him and deeply meaningful. The other community branch leader wanted to live by the sea, so she's now actually managing a branch down in Devon. So there's kind of a bit of internal engagement, but helping, I guess, people have an understanding of what prosperity was, and then being able to cascade that among their kind of 12 to 20 members of staff and colleagues was the key piece that we think drove a huge amount of change. Sounds good in principle. So these are the actual results. And I'll finish up on these. What we discovered was when we ran this pilot, it was a difficult time. We had to run this during the pandemic. In terms of it, so a lot of this was done remotely from our perspective, but from their perspective, they were in the branch dealing with face-to-face customers and a whole load of disruption. But overall, we're looking at 108% uplift versus their kind of peers in the network. And you can see the verbatums coming through. We use this thing called Medallia. Again, I imagine people TX are very familiar with Medallia. These are the kind of comments we were getting back from customers that we weren't seeing across the branch. And you can see plus 7.5% in the pilot branches versus the 3.6. Was something we're really, really happy with. And we're looking at it overall, that the most dramatic was in fact in Tottenham, where they were at something like I think a 50 to 60 plus net promoter score as a branch, versus where they ended up was more in the 80s. So massive improvements among our most troubled branches. Colleagues, from a point of view, would say, look, it's really just been transformational. You can see that the guys in the branch really believe in the brand. You can tell from the vibe in the place, stuff that you can't really measure in these kind of studies, stuff that comes out. I guess at the regional level, they're like, the staff aren't recognizable. They just seemed a lot happier in terms of what they're doing. And our view would be probably because we made the work more meaningful. We made them understand how working at our branch rather than the branch 3-4 doors down with a black horse and a green band on it, or a house and a blue band on it, or a light blue band and an eagle on it, if you get the point, was different. And what we were trying to do as Santander versus other customers. And so, look, just to conclude, I think what's important in these conversations about customer experience for us is not just like, how can you drive this? How can you make things more efficient? How can you be more simple? Of course, I'm not saying that stuff isn't important, but that is about your experience architecture, your kind of experience architecture. What you need to do is be able to give your colleagues a story that they want to tell, the customers and engage them with, understand that story and play it back, so that customers feel a part of that experience and feel that experience has been a natural part of their life and who they are, and speaks to their identity and fulfills their sense of self, if I can put it like that. Look, hopefully you found that interesting as a point of view, as some evidence of stuff that we've done. And look, right now we are looking at how we can roll out and extend our learnings across our entire branch network.
Joe, thank you so much. I certainly found that very interesting. And I'd like to invite everyone to ask any questions that you might have. We do have a Q&A box just on the screen for you if you want to submit them there. But Joe, I'm going to kick off the discussion by asking you, how can you make the case for investing in post-purchase relationships, particularly during hard economic times?
Well, for us, it's not. It's not as difficult as it might be for other people, because like you decide to open a bank account with us or a mortgage, you're with us for some time. It's not like, it's not like buying a Mars bar or an FMCG product where I consume it today but never again tomorrow. And that's why I guess the contrast with Big Mac is quite deliberate. But even Big Mac understands, on their app experience, that keeping a relationship with your customers after they've had their burger is important in terms of their loyalty points that they have now, the whole My Rewards gig, the offers that they push out on their own app. that even if you're in store, they encourage you to buy on their app because they want you to be feeling like your McDonald's is part of your own ecosystem. You might feel that's an intrusion too far, but I think the evidence is undeniable now that those brands that understand, they invest in the after sales relationship, people will come back again and again and again. I think it's it's a crude analogy, but ultimately, it's like, the first time you might meet your loved one and you spend the night together, if you don't call again, then it's like, I don't really think they like me very much and I don't really want to see them again. That's how you feel. And I don't want to suggest for a minute that a brand is like, someone that you might sleep with, but I think there is a reality that we, I guess, translate things this way for ourselves as consumers all the time. And I think I spend all that money with you and you never sent me even an email is not an unreasonable response for consumer. So I think it's crazy. I think that the challenge is having the faith that I guess you're the justification. Where are you in your growth journey, right? If you're an early brand, then look, it's about balancing the pre-purchase to the post-purchase rather than being all or nothing. I think, but if you've got a whole base of customers and you think, actually we just need to extend our value per customer, then it's a no-brainer to start thinking about post-purchase.
Thank you. And when you were introducing this program to the 3 branches that you mentioned, did you have any pushback from the staff there? And if you did, how did you approach that?
Well, I think the biggest challenge when you go into a place like a branch is your like central office, right? And can you go away as quickly as possible, or are we being assessed for something? So the first thing we did was we just went and spent a day in each branch, and we literally just sat in the branch and just observed, had a few conversations with a couple of colleagues, made them real, just made them comfortable, asked them what do they need help with as well, just have kind of normal conversations. I think, and then getting their feedback, look, it's helpful with the pilots, but giving the opportunity to feedback on each tool that we ran. So we would have launched each one of those 5 exercises like once every 1 or 2 weeks. So it's not like here's 5, go with them this week. So they have time to try it a bit, see what worked, see what didn't work, and we've adjusted the tools as a result of some of the feedback that we've got. So I think all of that kind of helps, and I think because we have such a relentless focus on NPS, to be honest, in terms of working cross division, it was like, what's the harm? What's the harm that we'll do? Maybe we'll find something. I think the question now is, having proven that there is quite probably a cause between doing this work and the performance of the experience, why aren't we looking to do this on a bigger scale and invest in it? And is it worth investing in this rather than, I don't know, some sort of new widget on the app? So these are the kind of questions, but that's like any business. What's going to biggest bang for the buck?
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I have a question here about technology. So if you were to roll out training on brand principles in the current climate of 2023, what would you do differently? And what are you most proud of? And how would you make sure that you could do that again in your training?
I'm not sure what they mean by brand principles, whether they mean our brand principles or on brand principles full stop. I think there's probably one thing I'm quite proud of, just as a brand person full stop, is I'm not really too much into my jargon. So I think if the risk of my discipline is people start to talk in like stuff that feels wishy-washy, or like I'm part of the culture that you just don't understand. And so I think my team do a really good job of trying to explain how brands can be experienced in kind of very simple terms and are accessible and don't make people feel stupid. And so that's the thing I'm proud of. And then when I look at it, I think I'm proud of the results. I'm proud of the fact that I think it feels. I'm proud that Tracy moved to Devon and that Vinny got his Tottenham thing. that they got it, you know, and that they were talking about prosperity in terms other than a home ownership and money. I think it's like we cut through and we help people understand what was quite a complex data story. Could have been like, no, that's utter BS, go away, you stupid brand people. But they bought into it and they delivered it and they got the results for it, and hopefully they were rewarded for it. But you know, I think that feels to me like the things I'm most proud of within that. And then I think taking an organization like a bank on a brand journey is absolutely thrilling, because look, people who work in banks tend to be more rational, more numbers. We don't think banks are emotional. It's very easy to say, oh, all banks are all the same. Well, I'm like, I don't really buy into that. I think we can build something different. In our hands, it's in our gift to build a different sort of bank, and you know, that's the job I'm fortunate to have.
Thank you. Okay, and the next question here is about employee experience. Sorry. So how do you approach employee experience, and how do you make sure it's good?
That's a really interesting. I mean, we worked on that very separately, and that's a whole other story about the employee experience. So, I think that, you know, our HR colleagues do a fantastic job of constantly improving our own engagement tools. We use something called Peakon now, which is like a rolling set of 12 to 14 questions you get. So you get asked every question once every 3 months. And I think what happens is, you know, how do we respond to those challenges? Well, it's up to HR to decide what they want to do. I think the key thing for us is, though, we have a clear view on prosperity and about it being about the ability to exact change. And I think the job is to make colleagues realize they're all a part of making that happen, number one, that they're part of a community where they can turn up and be themselves as themselves, but also that change within their own lives in terms of their jobs and their workforce is also part of delivering that brand purpose, and should apply to them as colleagues as much as applying it to the customers that we serve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Thank you. I think that that's just about all we've got time for, to be honest, Joe, but that was a really good discussion and I really enjoyed your session. And I love the crude analogy, and I'm very happy for the lady who's moved down to Devon. Lovely story. Yeah. So yeah, thanks so much for being involved, and thank you so much to everyone who has joined the webinar today. I just want to remind everyone that this will be available on demand on our website at cxnetwork.com if you wanted to revisit any of Joe's talking points. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.